How did we turn this crusty Game Boy into this newly refurbished one? Let me show you. This original Game Boy, or DMG Game Boy, was originally released back in 1989. Even though it was considered inferior to the Sega Game Gear and the Atari Lynx's handheld systems because they both had backlight and color, Game Boy sales would keep their lead and be the preferred system. Now this may have been because it was smaller, lighter, and its 4 batteries would last way longer than the Game Gear and the Lynx's 9 batteries. Now Jennifer's Game Boy here is pretty dirty, so we're going to give it a nice cleaning and we're going to throw some mods in there. Now on starting it up, I found one little problem. A glitched Nintendo logo means that it can't read the game. Now this usually can be fixed by either cleaning the game or cleaning the internal pins on the Game Boy. I clean the game pins with a Q-tip and isopropyl alcohol, and while the pins are still wet, I put it in and out of the system a few times to clean the internal pins inside the Game Boy. Then I tested it. Dang it. Alright, let's take it apart and see what we find on the inside. DMG Game Boys are held together with 6 tri-head screws. Once the screws are out, you can separate the 2 halves of the Game Boy. Just be careful because there is a ribbon cable holding the 2 together. Now this Game Boy was pretty rough on the inside. There was a lot of corrosion. Now I have no idea what could have happened to this Game Boy. I don't believe it was dropped in any kind of body of water, however it might have been kept in a damp or humid environment. I'm going to disassemble the rest of this to give it a good cleaning and try to find what's wrong.
Many screws later.
The reverse side of the backboard didn't look too bad, nor did the front board. However, the speaker was a little fuzzy. Hoping that the game reading problem is still just dirt, I used a toothbrush and 99% isopropyl alcohol to really clean those pins as best as I could. And then I just went over the entire board with that toothbrush and alcohol because, as you saw earlier, this thing really needed it. Once I believed everything was clean enough, I put the 2 boards back together and I popped in a game to test it. Because I don't have the back shell on, which has the battery compartment, I had to power this up using my desktop power supply. Unfortunately, none of that cleaning did anything. But then I realized I accidentally had this set to 3 volts, not 6 volts.
Amateur hour!
Yeah, it didn't change a thing, and when I thought about it, why would it change a thing? Anyways. Examining the board, it looks like there might be some corrosion underneath this little copper plate. And that's exactly where the traces from the game card are. So let's take it off and have a look. I removed as much solder as I could using my solder sucker and some wick, and then I gently started prying up on the shield while adding heat. I didn't see any obvious trace damage, so I tried reflowing the pins on the game card. I tested it after reflowing everything, and it didn't change a thing, so I started checking traces with continuity. I didn't find anything using continuity, so I brought out my microscope to look at the chip. I was going to start push testing each of these pins to see if any were loose, but I found all this corrosion under these 2 pins, and there was no continuity. I went to put a solder blob on the leg of the chip here, and this trace ended up coming right out. So it was completely corroded through and out of the board. Now I'm not the best at micro soldering, so this was a little bit of a daunting task, but I had to solder jumper wires over that broken part.
Many hours later.
Okay, that took way longer than I thought it would. I soldered wires to each of the legs there, and then I brought them over to the game connector's pins. Now it would have been better and way neater to solder to the vias on the same side of the board, however both of them were under the game connector. And I'm not at the skill level yet where I can solder directly to the trace itself. So this was a comfortable compromise. Let's just hope it works. Nice. Oh my, that took so long, but it works. With it reading games, I'm going to clean the speaker up and give it a quick audio test just to make sure everything else is working. Perfect, moving on. I removed this battery terminal, and in hindsight, I should have done this before I soldered those wires on, but here I am. The corrosion ended up eating right through the nickel plate on this one. I was hoping to clean it with vinegar, however, I'm just going to end up replacing it with this new one. I reattached the copper plate by resoldering all those points, and then I put the new battery terminal on. Now that this thing's fully functional, it's time to clean it. Using some alcohol and my wife's toothbrush, I started removing Jennifer's name. Gone are the days where other kids might have tried to steal her Game Boy. After the toothbrush, I move to a Q-tip. And then I move to a rag. This is just to ensure that there's no more permanent marker left. With the shell completely cleaned, I used a little bit of polish just to really get the last of that dirt out. And it really starts bringing back some of that original color. Now that the shell is clean, it's time to start adding upgrades. I started by adding an IPS screen. This one in particular has brightness control and has about 50 or so different color palettes. If you ever install one of these, this little connector here can be a little bit finicky. It requires almost no pressure at all to plug in. So if you find yourself using any amount of pressure to push it in, you probably don't have it aligned right. Just keep playing around with it until it pops on. Now this screen ends up replacing the entire front board. This makes it incredibly easy for anybody to do. It's just a few screws and a tiny little bit of basic soldering on the speaker wires. Now before going too far, I just set everything up just to test the screen to ensure that it's actually working. Perfect. With that working, we can reassemble the front of the shell. I cleaned all the buttons as well as the silicone to make sure that it has good conductivity. It looks, I missed that one there. Actually, I should fix that soon. I fixed that, right? Oh, well, the speaker, but it's wrong. Oh, there we go. Okay, that feels better. With everything replaced, I put on the new front board. Now I also put an audio amp in this Game Boy, which I completely forgot to film, but I'll give you a quick breakdown of how it works. Your audio input's going to enter around here, and then you're also going to add some power to that mix. Now, in the middle here, a bunch of magic is going to happen, and your new amplified audio is going to go out through this cord here. Now I'm not sure if that's exactly how it works, but I'm pretty sure that's pretty close. With the two halves of the shell fully assembled, it's time to put them back together. Once it's together and you know that there's nothing getting caught and it's closing properly, you can return all the screws. Now the owner requested a rechargeable battery, so we're going to put one in with USB-C charging. Now if you're installing one of these or you have a Game Boy with one, it's important to remember that you shouldn't play while it's plugged in, and you shouldn't use a USB-C to USB-C charging cord. And last but not least, I'm going to replace the original screen protector with a nice tempered glass one. This is so you can see that IPS screen nice and clear. This Game Boy came to me really dirty and really crusty, but it's leaving here looking almost as good as new. Now Jennifer might have to put her name back onto this because it's definitely stealable after all these upgrades. Our brightness control and color change look great on this Game Boy. In the audio amp, oh, missed a spot. If you enjoyed this video, please consider liking it. If you want to see more, you can always hit that subscribe button. Now, as always, I have no training in this and I'm learning as I go, so I encourage you to learn with me. However, don't imitate me without doing your own research first. And a huge shout out to Maddie Newey, who I'm going to link below there for doing all the voices for the time cards. Let's save the consoles.